Hello and welcome to another monthly reading wrap up, and today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in September. So as always, I'm going to start with the stats for the reading month first. And in the month of September I read 16 books in total. That was a total of 5,408 pages, which came to about 180 pages per day. So I was happy with that average. It was slightly up on a couple of the previous months, and it was a pretty solid reading month as well. Now I didn't have as many 5 stars as I have had in previous months. I only found one 5-star book, and I did have one DNF, which had I finished it, it would probably rated it 2 stars. And I did have another 2-star book as well. So in total I had 2 2-star reads, 1 3-star read, 12 4-star reads and 1 5-star read. In terms of how I read the books, I read 1 beta, 1 ARC, 1 audiobook, 1 ebook, and 12 Kindle Unlimited books. I didn't read any physical books at all this month. And then in terms of the genres that I read, there were 2 dark romances, 7 mafia romances, 1 MC romance, 2 paranormal, 2 rockstar romances, 1 small town and 1 sports romance as well. So a fairly good spread, but as always the majority of the books that I read were either mafia romances or dark romances. So before we get into the review of the books that I read, I just want to say a very warm welcome and thank you to all of my new subscribers. I've had actually quite a few new subscribers this month, taking my total to over 400 subscribers, and I'm absolutely delighted. So thank you very much if that is you. Welcome to the channel, and I hope you continue to watch more of my videos. And if you haven't subscribed yet, remember to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my videos and want to see more content from me. So let's get stuck into it then. The very first book that I read in the month of September was actually a beta copy of The Nephilim's Finesse by Eliza Hampstead, and this is book 3 in her War of the Nephilim series. It's not actually due out to November, so I won't talk about it too much, and I will talk about it more actually when it comes out on release day. But I thoroughly enjoyed the beta copy, and I'm looking forward to reading the final version when we can see all of the changes that have been implemented once she's got all the feedback from the beta and ARC readers and everything. So really looking forward to that. But essentially this is a paranormal romance, and it, as the name implies, it revolves around a group of Nephilim who are half angel, half human. And they live on Earth, and they're kind of like the protectors, a bit of equivalent to like the shadow hunters or something like that. And they make sure that they keep humanity safe from other paranormal creatures. And in this world we have you know, vampires and witches and demons and fae creatures as well. So it's a really sort of good mix of paranormal creatures if you like that type of romance. In this one we're following Victoria and Raph, and Victoria is a vampire. She's quite an old vampire, several hundred years old, and Raph, who is now head of the Nephilim. And essentially in a previous book, Victoria is the arch enemy. She has amassed a sort of vampire army to try and take out the Nephilim, to give the vampires more power, and during this sort of battle that happens in a previous book, Raph manages to capture Victoria, and now they are holding her captive, trying to get some answers out of her in terms of who she's working with, what her plans are, where some of her secret vampire locations are, so that they can get rid of the vampire threat. And so this is a really interesting captive sort of romance as well, and it's one that I've been anticipating because we knew that Victoria was a, you know, a baddie from the previous books, and I've been really looking forward to seeing what happens when she's actually in captivity, with Raph very much in charge, trying to get information out of her, and watching her character arc, because obviously this is a romance, so we know a romance is going to bloom between Raph and Victoria, and I was really excited to see it play out. And I have to warn you as well, this book is very spicy, and so I would thoroughly recommend. And if you haven't read them yet, I would also recommend books 1 and 2 in the series as well, and you've got plenty of time to read them before book 3 comes out in November. But like I said, I'll probably talk more about it when it actually goes live later this year. Then the next book I read was Unhinged by Vera Valentine, and this is just a short story. It's an erotic romance, kind of a paranormal erotic romance, and it was something that I'd seen advertised on Instagram, and I thought it sounded interesting. I was in the market for a very short read. I thought this was a good way to get my page count in and get myself started for the month of September. Now unfortunately this was one of the books that I rated 2 stars, and I debated with myself quite a lot around how I would rate this book, because it is a very short story, and I knew going in that it was a little bit on the wacky side. And so I didn't want to downrate it based on what it was about. But this is for me, this is a 2-star rated book on Goodreads, which meant it's okay, and it was okay. It was a short story, like I say, not too much to get upset about, but I'll explain why I gave this a 2-star. And it's a paranormal story based on a sentient front door and our human, who is Tana. Now essentially the concept of this one is that she has a front door that is sentient. It can see and hear things both on the outside of her apartment and on the inside, and this door very much likes what he sees. When Tana is in her apartment, he, you know, watches what she's doing when she's inside, and he's very much taken a shine to her. But obviously he's helpless because he's just a front door. But he's also been observing things that have been going on the other side of the door, and he knows that the landlord who kind of looks after this apartment block is also quite predatory. He's seen him take other women out into the forest, and he seems to be sniffing around Tana and has some nefarious plans for her. So the front door is very, very worried because he knows what's going on. He thinks Tana's in danger, and there's obviously nothing he can do about it. However, his father visits him, who is some sort of god, and he said, oh, you know, you were made from a tree that was in this ancient forest, hence you're sentient and you're one of my children, and I'll give you the power to go into this woman's dream so you can speak to her. And essentially they do this deal where if Tana makes love to the door using the door handle, then the door will come to life and he'll become a sentient man. So it is a wild and wacky premise. Like I say, it is a very short story. This is one of the 2 stars that I gave away. So going in, I knew it was going to be a little bit crazy. But I felt, for me, one, it was only a short story. It was a really crazy premise, and I would have been fine at the first sexual activity in the book, because after she has done what she needs to do to make him into a human, then they're sort of together, but events unfold where he turns back into a door, and then by the end of the book she has to basically have sex with the door handle every month in order for him to continue to be human. And I just thought, I'm happy with it. You know, in my mind I was like comfortable with it happening the first time. It's a very short story, it's a crazy concept, but I'm on board with it. I can go with it, but I just felt the way that the story went and kind of what happens and how it concludes at the end, I just thought it was a little bit odd and not my cup of tea at all. So then the next book that I read was an ARC, and this was Shattered Secrets by Lilian, and I was very pleased to be accepted onto her ARC team. I'd never read a book by Lilian before, but I know she does a lot of mafia romances. So I was going into this one thinking that it was a mafia romance, and it's a standalone, but I think it's a spin-off from her Mazzina crime family series, because some of those family members do appear in this book. And the main character in this one is Hudson, and he is the lawyer to the mafia family. But unfortunately, an incident happens right at the start of this book where he gets amnesia, so it becomes an amnesia romance. He can't remember what happened to him or who he is. And we're also following Hadley, who is Hudson's wife. Now, this is, like I say, an amnesia romance. It's also a second chance romance, which I rated 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, and I'll definitely be reading a book by Lilian again. However, it wasn't what I was expecting, but not at all in a bad way. So, or like I say, although this guy was the lawyer to the mafia family, we don't really see any mafia action, because this is all focused around the fact that her that Hudson loses his memory due to an incident that happens very early on in the start of the book, and he disappears. So this book is really in sort of 3 parts. The first part of the book, covering about 20% of the book, is showing how much Hudson and Hadley are in love with each other. They are so in love with each other. They've got an amazing relationship. They've got an amazing circle of friends, and they've got the best life. He is, so for all she knows, he's a regular lawyer. She knows that he defends a lot of criminals, but she's very, very proud of what he does. And they have a lovely house, a lovely lifestyle, and everything is absolutely fantastic. The only spot of sadness in their life is that they're desperately trying to have a baby, and she seems to not be able to conceive. So there is trigger warnings in here for fertility issues. So this is the first sort of 20% of the book. And then basically an incident happens where he gets injured and loses his memory, except she doesn't know he's injured. He just disappears one night and never comes back. So the next, I'd say 30% of the book, 40% of the book is when her husband is completely missing. We don't know where he's gone. We don't know what's happened to him. And for all intents and purposes, everyone believes that he's dead. Now, at the very moment that he goes missing and he disappears, she finds out that she's pregnant. And so what should be the happiest moment of her life after all of the you know, after trying to conceive a baby for so long, what it should be the happiest moment of her life is actually tinged with a lot of sadness because her husband isn't there to enjoy it with her. But nevertheless, she obviously has the baby, brings the baby up, and by the time we get to kind of like the 60% mark in the book, I would say, the baby is now 4 years old, and she, while everyone else thinks her husband is long gone, is dead, he's never coming back, she is holding on to every single hope that he is still alive and out there. And indeed, eventually they do find him, but he, like I say, he has no memory, he doesn't know that she's his wife, and he's actually now a mayor in a completely different town. And she goes to see him, and there's no flicker of recognition. And so the last part of this book is when they are getting their second chance at their relationship, where he's trying to remember things and see if they can, you know, rekindle their romance, if they even should or even still want to after everything that's happened. And of course, because it's sort of mafia tinged, there's lots of secrets that are revealed. We find out why he lost his memory in the first place, and obviously there's a little mystery going on there as well. So overall, I really did enjoy this one. Like I said, I'll definitely be reading something of Lilian Harris's again. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. It was not the normal amnesia romance that you would expect, but I would highly recommend if you are interested in reading it. So definitely give that one a go. Then I dove into Good Gone Bad by Giana, and this is book 3 in the Fallen Men series. So this one is an MC romance. It's also a bit of a forbidden romance as well, because the main characters are Lionel, or Lion Dana, and he's a police officer in the town where the Fallen Men MC club is. And we also have Harley Rose, who is the daughter of Zeus, who is the head of this MC, Fallen MC club. Now, Harley Rose and Lionel Dana have a long-standing relationship, and in fact, if you've read the other books in the Fallen Men series, you'll know that Zeus went to prison for a number of years, and while he was away, Dana was also a young boy, older than Harley Rose, but basically kind of very much looked after her and her brother King, and their family was really good to the kids. So basically he would take them home, his mum and dad would look after King and Harley Rose, and basically, you know, they grew up kind of together. Now, as they got older and Harley Rose sort of came of age, there was definitely sparks and chemistry between Dana and Harley Rose, and they shared a moment together. But then he kind of disappears from her life for about 3 years, and what we find out is that he's gone in undercover into this rival MC motorbike gang, and he is trying to bring them down because this is a particularly bad MC club, and he's trying to gather the evidence he needs to bring them down. Now Harley Rose gets herself into a bit of trouble. She starts dating one of these guys from the other MC, and eventually she ends up, and this is right at the start of the book, she actually ends up killing him. And then the one, instead of going to her dad or her brother for help, she rings Dana and basically confesses what she's done. And obviously he comes to help her out of that situation, and in so doing she ends up going undercover with him, with this other club, and they get themselves into all kinds of trouble. So this is very much a forbidden romance. Zeus definitely doesn't want them to be together because at the end of the day he's a police officer, but also they shouldn't be together either in real life or in their undercover situation, because if they found out that they knew each other in their undercover situation, then Dana's cover would be completely blown as well, and they would be in serious trouble for their own lives. I've really enjoyed the Fallen Men series so far. I rated this one 4 stars. I think it was a very, very good instalment in the series, and I'll be going on to read the rest of the books in the series very soon. Then the next one I read was Pen Pal by J T Geissinger, and this is a standalone kind of dark romance. I actually read this as an audiobook, and this is quite rare for me because I've never read it before, and I generally only listen to audiobooks of books that I've read previously, and mainly because I listen in the car and I like to stay focused when I'm driving. So if I've read the book before, then it doesn't matter if I miss bits out, and miss bits because I'm concentrating on the traffic, that sort of thing. But I knew this one was narrated by Troy Duran and Tara Langella, and I absolutely love both of their narration styles. I think they're absolutely fantastic together, and they've done some other J T Geissinger books as well, and particularly the last one in the Queens and Monsters series with Spider and Rina, because their voices I think were spot on for those characters. And I knew they were duetting again with this one, and I thought I absolutely want to read this book, and I think the best approach is to listen to the audiobook, so that is what I did. So in this one we're following Aiden and Cala, and overall I absolutely thought it was fantastic and gave it 4 stars. Now, there was quite a bit of controversy when this one first came out last year, because it was advertised as a romance, but a lot of people who read this one said it wasn't a traditional, that they wouldn't class it as a romance because it didn't have a traditional HEA. And so I was sort of nervous to read this one. I would definitely say if it's not a romance, it's definitely a love story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It had all of the hallmarks of a J T Geissinger book. The characters were fantastic. The hero was very, very masculine, but extremely sweet and swoony towards the heroine, but their sexy time was on point. It was very, very spicy. There was a lot of spicy scenes in this book, and I thought the story was really interesting. She did a great job of giving you enough clues to figure out kind of what was going on as we built up to the ending. And because I was prepared for the end, I kind of already knew what was happening with this book. I'm not going to say what it is in case you've not read it, but I was prepared, and therefore it probably wasn't as emotionally charged for me as it could have done if it was completely out of the blue. But let's just say, like I say, it's not a traditional HEA, but they do get their happy ever after, and I would definitely describe this one as a love story. If you like J T Geissinger, then I absolutely recommend reading it, and it's actually the perfect time of year to read it as well, because it fits perfectly with the kind of the October and spooky vibe as well. So then after that I moved to a mafia romance, and I picked up Chosen by Sinner by Michelle Hurd, and this one is book 4 in the Sinner series. I read this one on KU and gave it 4 stars. So like I said, this is a mafia romance. It's also a brother's best friend. So in this one we're following Luca and Maria, and essentially both of them really, really like each other. They've known each other a long time. Luca is Maria's brother's best friend, but both Luca and Maria think the other person doesn't like them. They've tried hard for many, many years to hide how they feel about each other, and therefore it's resulted in them maybe being deliberately difficult with each other, deliberately hiding their emotions, so it made the other person feel that they actually didn't like them at all. Maybe they despised them, in fact. However, that is not the case, and they're secretly in love with each other. And At the very start of this book, it's Maria's birthday. They go to Las Vegas for her as sort of a birthday present, and Luca and Maria end up being alone together, drink too much, and when Maria gets drunk, she tells Luca exactly how she feels about him, and they end up getting married in a Vegas wedding. Now, when they wake up the next morning, Maria can't remember what happened. She doesn't understand what's happened or how it's come to this. Luca wasn't actually that drunk. He just took advantage of her and thought, this is my one opportunity to get her exactly where I want her as my wife, and I'm going to take this chance. But of course, he doesn't want to admit that to her, so he pretends that he was drunk as well. And Maria is horrified and wants an annulment, but their families insist that they at least stay together for at least 6 months, try and work it out, and also to save a bit of face as well, because it'd be a bit embarrassing for the family if they got married and then had it in all straight away. So they end up having this sort of like forced surprise wedding, if you like, this and then living together as husband and wife in close proximity together, and Luca very much insists that they live together as husband and wife. Now, I absolutely love this part of the book. It was really, really low angst. They came together very quickly. They had great chemistry. They were lovely. It was a lovely couple, and I really enjoyed this first part. But the reason I didn't give it a 5-star is because I felt that they did actually get together too early. There was quite a lot of the book then that went on, and what kind of transpired, Michelle Hurd tried to write in kind of a bit of a villain, and how the villain sort of like revealed himself, some of the things that he was doing, and finally how they kind of catch him and stop him. I thought was a little bit weak. However, there was quite a big section in this book as well where Maria actually gets injured, and so a lot of this is about caretaking and Luca really taking care of her. So there's some really sweet and swoony moments. Like I say, I really enjoyed this couple. It was a really, really sweet romance between them. But there was just something missing from this one where I think it all happened a bit too quick. It was all a bit too easy, and then, like I said, the villain ended up not being very villainous at all, so it was a bit disappointing at the end. But overall, I really, really liked it, and like I said, gave it 4 stars. Then I went straight on to finish a series with Captured by a Sinner, and this is book 5 in the Sinner series, and the one that I'd actually been highly anticipating because it's about Victor and Rose. And Victor is our Russian mafia hero in this one, and right at the very start of this series, he kidnaps Rose, takes her hostage, places her in his house where she has been living for the last 3 years. And you knew from the other books and from what's been said in the background of the other books that Victor is massively in love with Rose, and she's given him an awful lot of trouble. And of course we absolutely love this. So this is when we finally get to see their book, to see what happened after he first captures her and takes her home. What happens in the 3 years when she is living in his house, but she's still absolutely fighting him at every step of the way. And finally, what happens when it's time to let her go, because in this one, Victor rationalises kidnapping her by saying that he has taken her for her own good, it's for her own safety, and he's going to look after her. When he first takes her, she's only 17, so he's going to keep her for 3 years until she's 21, and at that point he'll let her go. And he does stick to his word, and he does eventually have to let her go, and it's kind of what happens then and how they end up finding their way back to each other. So I really enjoyed this one. I was, like I say, I was highly anticipating it, was really looking forward to reading their story, and really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. Then I decided to carry on with the Legacy of the Gods series with book 2, which was God of Pain by Rina Kent. This is a mafia romance, or at least a legacy series, so it's been previously a mafia series, and now we are following the kids who are at college. It's kind of like their story and their relationships with each other. In God of Pain, we're following Crichton and Annika, and it's a lot of tropes in this one. It's a college romance, it's a captive situation, it's a grumpy sunshine situation. It's very dark, and there's also some BDSM elements to this one as well. Again, I really liked this one, gave this one 4 stars. As with the first book in the series, which was God of Malice, this is a very dark book. Crichton himself is very different from Killian from the first book, but he is extremely troubled and tortured hero. He is sort of a quiet sort of hero. He hasn't said very much in the previous book, and Annika is very much a talker. And so Annika is Jeremy's sister, and Crichton is I think it's Eli's brother and cousin to Glyndon, Brandon and Landon. So they're all sort of interconnected, but Crichton is very, very quiet. He doesn't talk very much. Like I say, he's very dark and broody and troubled. Annika doesn't shut up. She's talking all the time. She absolutely is desperate to get his attention, trying to get him to talk to her, and he's very, very, you know, stoic and doesn't really say a lot. But this is their relationship together, how eventually Annika gets under his skin and they start to have a relationship together. Crichton's been through a lot in his past, and he, like I say, is very tortured and troubled. He is actually adopted, and he has very vivid memories of what happened to his parents. And he's desperately trying to find out what happened, like who did it to them essentially. And when he finds out who did it, and he finds out that Annika's family is somehow implicated in this, things come to a bit of a head, and Annika ends up shooting Crichton, and so they kind of then have this sort of like almost like this enemies to lovers situation, because they absolutely don't know how they're going to continue to be together after what's transpired. But then we have a situation where when Crichton is fully recovered from being shot, he decides he's going to kidnap her and keep her captive until she agrees to be with him. So it's a very, very interesting book. There's a lot of we find out a lot more information about these characters. Quite, like I say, Crichton's been through quite a lot growing up. He's very, very troubled, and it's basically how he works through that and how he and Annika can overcome what's happened in their past to move forward in the future. So really enjoyed it, like I say, and would recommend. And then I went on straight away to read God of Wrath by Rina, which is book 3 in the Legacy of the Gods series. And in this one we're following Jeremy and Cecily. So Jeremy is Annika's brother, and Cecily is friends with Annika. The more I've read of these books, the more I realise how interweaved they are. Stuff happens in the other books that maybe you don't notice straight away, but basically very much flows into these other stories. So the timelines almost run in parallel. So things have been going on with Cecily and Jeremy very much from book 1. And Cecily is a very quiet, sort of shy person. Her friends think she's a prude. She hates talking about sex, and is still a virgin at the start of this book. Jeremy is kind of next in line to be a mafia leader. He is very cutthroat and cold. He's not quite as strictly a psychopath as Killian was, but still he has some behaviours and traits that very much put him in the psychopath column. And both Cecily and Jeremy also have a primal kink as well. So Jeremy loves nothing better than chasing Cecily through the woods. Now this one is also very sort of an interesting story. It's quite a complex story. Jeremy is also a bit of a troubled hero. He has despite how sort of confident he is, or how confident he comes across, he's actually got feelings that people won't ever choose him, and he just wants to be chosen and loved for who he is. And so he and Cecily get off on a bit of a wrong foot, really, because Cecily at the start of this book has an absolute massive infatuation with Landon, who is Glyndon's brother, and she thinks he's just absolutely wonderful. Like I said, she's got a massive crush on him, and Landon is very manipulative and kind of talks her into going to spy on Jeremy and Jeremy's sort of group, if you like, and Cecily ends up in Jeremy's crossfires as a result. Now Cecily signs up to a sort of a dating agency, but for a sex club, where she is hoping to be matched up with Landon, but she ends up actually being matched up with Jeremy. And when Jeremy realises that it's because she is in love with Landon, he's not too happy about it, but he's determined to get her to stop having feelings for Landon and to have feelings for him instead. And what happens is really the start of a very strange relationship where he pretty much forces her to meet up with him every night. They very much keep their relationship a secret, and it very much revolves around their primal play sort of kink that they both have. And at the same time, Jeremy is obviously like troubled, but also with Cecily, she's got quite a traumatic past as well. She was sexually assaulted as a teenager by a boyfriend, so someone she should have been able to trust but couldn't, and so hence why she is now seen by her friends as quite prudish, because she's actually scared of the opposite sex and scared of getting hurt again, and scared of being able to trust someone. But nevertheless, she does have this primal play kink, and therefore she wonders if there's something wrong with her, if she's damaged in some way. And so it's quite liberating for her to actually be with Jeremy, because he just lets her explore her sexuality and what kind of she enjoys without kind of any shame or remorse or regret. And they end up having a really, really interesting but beautiful relationship, I think, once they both get through their issues. So after that, I'd read quite a lot of dark romances, and I thought I needed a bit of a change, a breath of fresh air. So I turned to Hideaway Heart by Melanie Harlow. And this is book 2 in the Cherry Tree Harbour. And this is another rule I broke for myself, because normally I like to read books in series in a series in order. I don't normally skip to book 2 if I haven't read book 1. But I really, really wanted to read this one. I'd heard some really good things about it, and I didn't really fancy book 1. And so I just thought, I'll break my own rules just this one time. And I'm so glad I did. This one is very much a small town romance, but it's also a pop star bodyguard sort of romance. And it's forced proximity, kind of one bed scenario, which I absolutely love. And this one was just so brilliant and sweet throughout. So in this one, we're following Kelly Jo Sullivan, or otherwise known as Pixie Hart. And Pixie Hart is her stage name. She's a very famous country singer. And then we've got Xander Buckley, who is basically the unwilling bodyguard. Essentially, Xander is a really good friend of Kelly's brother. They were both Navy SEALs. Kelly's brother's still a Navy SEAL, and he's currently away on deployment, but she wants to go on holiday. She needs some downtime. She's needs a break from her, being famous and from her country career. And she decides she's going to spend 2 weeks in a cabin in the woods. And her brother was like, absolutely not. You need to go there with security. You actually need a bodyguard or something. And she said, no, I just want to spend some time on my own. She's got some trust issues, because recently her bodyguards or her security team has been leaking things to the press. So she really doesn't trust anyone, and she just wants to be alone. So he decides he's going to ring his friend Xander. Now Xander was with him in the Navy SEALs. Xander is now retired though, but he owes her brother a favour, because her brother saved his life, and so he basically said he will do anything for him, and that includes going to be Kelly's bodyguard for 2 weeks while she's on holiday. And her brother makes Xander promise that he won't take no for an answer, because he warns him, when you turn up, she's not going to be happy you're there. So just letting you know that, and make sure you absolutely are her bodyguard. So of course he turns up in her cabin, where she's absolutely expecting to have a lovely time, and she's not too impressed that he's turned up out of the blue. She absolutely says no at first, tries to get him to go away, and he's not having any of it, and he goes and sits himself out on the porch. And at first she's saying he can't come in, he can't use the bathroom, he can't sleep on the couch, but eventually, of course, it doesn't last too long, and she eventually relents and lets him in, lets him use the bathroom, cooks him some food, and they come to this arrangement where she allows him to stay, but she absolutely wants to have a lovely time as well. The thing is, they have great chemistry together. They're both lovely people. Xander is absolutely a sweetheart, and he ends up introducing her to his family, taking her around the town, taking her out on his boat, and they have an absolutely wonderful couple of weeks together, where they very quickly fall in love. But reality sets in when she has to go back to her, you know, her real life, as it were, back to Nashville. And we find out more about what's going on in the backstory, why she couldn't trust the security team. She's got some people around her who can't be trusted. And yeah, how is she going to continue this relationship with Xander? Are they going to try and maintain a long distance relationship, or how's it all going to work? But like I said, this was very, very low angst. There's no third act breakup. I really, really enjoyed it, and this couple was so sweet and nice. But it was such a fun read as well. It wasn't boring in any way, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So rated it 4 stars. Then I was enjoying the kind of like the famous singer sort of theme, and I decided I was going to pick up Storm by Carian. This one had been on my TBR for a while. I really like Carian Cole's other books that I'd read, Torn and Tied, which is a spin-off from this series, because Storm is book 1 in the Ashes and Embers series, and Asher in particular plays quite a big role in Torn, but also he makes an appearance in Don't Kiss the Bride as well. So in this one we're following Storm and Evie, and Storm is a member of the Ashes and Embers band, and he is one of the guitarists. And Evie is like a marketing manager. She's on her way to some sort of conference or training weekend, and the sat-nav takes her down a back road, but the weather isn't great. It starts to snow quite heavily, and she ends up skidding off the road and into a ditch, and then she's not able to use the car anymore. Now where she's crashed, there's no phone signal or anything, so she is now trapped in a car in the middle of nowhere. Luckily for her, Storm is coming along in his truck. He sees that she's gone off the side of the road, and he stops to help her, and she agrees to get in the truck with him. He's going to take her to his house so she can ring to get out and get a tow truck, get a car out. But when they're on the way back to his house, a deer or something runs out into the road. He oversteers to avoid this animal, and they end up crashing again, and this time into a tree, and now his truck is broken down. They can't get out of the situation they're in, and they've got no choice at this point but to stay in the truck overnight while the worst of the weather passes, until he can go out and get some help, get their cars towed, and get her safely home. So now they're in close proximity together in the back of his truck. He's got a dog, there's a blanket, but they have a very, very interesting connection. Now there's a very, very erotic scene while they're in the truck. He doesn't touch her, they don't have sex or anything, but they are very, very intimate in this moment, and they have an absolutely amazing chemistry and connection with each other. The thing is, Evie's been in a relationship with her boyfriend Michael for a very long time, pretty much since they were kids, and she is extremely loyal to him, and she is absolutely guilt-ridden at the fact that she has potentially cheated on her boyfriend. Now Storm really, really likes her, and he basically sort of says, you know, you've absolutely not cheated on him, but I don't think he's the best person for you anyway, and maybe you should leave him and be with me. And of course she's like, absolutely not, that's kind of not what's going on here. But he's very, very persistent, and as once they're sort of rescued and she goes back to her life, she starts to notice more and more things about her boyfriend Michael, and starts to think more and more about what Storm said, how Storm treated her, how Michael's treating her, and starting to realise that they've probably got themselves into a place where, although they love each other, they're no longer in love with each other, and her boyfriend Michael does not treat her well at all, until she decides that actually she does deserve better and makes steps to leave her boyfriend, and that's where Storm comes in. I absolutely love this one. Storm is a fantastic character. I thought they had great chemistry together, and while some people might not like this because it has got a little bit of cheating in it, in a sense, you don't feel bad for the boyfriend at all. In fact, he's been cheating on her, and there's some great caretaking scenes in here as well. When she gets quite sick, Storm comes to look after her when her boyfriend is away and can't. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that one, gave that one 4 stars. And then I went on to read Vandal, which is book 2 in the Ashes and Embers series, also by Carian. And this one is following Vandal and Tabitha, and Vandal is another member of the band. He is the bass guitarist. And this one was very, very different from the first book. Vandal is extremely troubled. He has got a lot of childhood issues that he's working through. An absolute sense of abandonment. He is not the greatest of guys on the surface because, you know, although he's now, you know, a famous guitarist in a band that's doing very, very well, he comes from a very poor background, but he has kind of been doing a lot of drugs, drinking a lot, kind of wasting his life. And the only good thing in his life is his daughter, who he just had with a one-night stand basically, and he's completely doesn't get along with the mother of his child at all. And in fact, right at the start of this book, what happens is the mother of the child forces him to drive her home very late at night because she wants her daughter back with her, and she doesn't want him to her staying with her dad anymore. And he tries to argue against this, but this lady is absolutely adamant. He brings the daughter home, and so he takes her out in his truck. And on the way back, on the way to dropping her back off at her mum's, he's in a car accident. And when he wakes up in the hospital, his daughter has died in this car accident. And not only that, but the driver of the other car is also deceased as well. And so now he goes into a very big downward spiral, and in fact Asher pretty much kicks him out of the band and says, you need to get yourself sorted out, and you can't be in the band until you come to terms with what's happened and you give up the drink and drugs and you basically come back to normal society. And he feels very, very abandoned and angry about all of this. Now, when he starts going to the cemetery to see the grave of his daughter, he starts noticing another woman in the cemetery, which is Tabitha. And Tabitha is the widow of the man that also died in this car accident. And so when he sees her and realises who she is, he kind of has this moment where he thinks he's going to be able to seek some kind of redemption or be able to make her happy. And he feels like if he can make her happy, then he can make up for the fact that it may be his fault that her husband died. And then because she is also in a very, very dark place, she is really, really grieving. She's given up her job because she can't cope. When this very handsome stranger comes up to her in the cemetery and offers to whisk her away on his motorbike and offers for her to stay with him in his home for a month, she absolutely snaps his hand off and takes him up on the offer. And what he absolutely wants to do is enter into a BDSM relationship with her. He's very much a dom and he's looking for a permanent sub. And so he basically convinces her that he can help her overcome her grief if she totally submits to him and becomes his submissive. And so, like I say, it's a very different vibe completely to Storm. Vandal is a very, very different character. He's much darker, and it's a very, very interesting sort of relationship that he has with Tabitha. And then obviously you know that eventually she's going to find out the truth about who he is. And so you're waiting for the fallout for that. But I really like the way that Carian handled it, and how this book concluded. So again, I would highly recommend. Then the next one I'm not going to spend too long talking about. It was one of my only DNFs of the whole year so far. It was called The Bonus by A.J. Adams, and it was a cartel mafia romance. Now I specifically picked this one up because I read a lot of Irish, Italian and Russian mafia romances, and I was looking for some different types of mafia romances. So I was looking for more cartel, sort of Yakuza romances instead, and I came across this one on Amazon. It looked okay and I thought I'd give it a try, but unfortunately just a few pages in I really wasn't enjoying it. I persevered until about the 25% mark when I just thought to myself, why am I doing it? Why am I continuing to read it? It was just awful, really, really bad. And I hate to say that because I think if someone's actually put pen to paper and written a book, then I like to at least give them some respect for that. But I have to say it was very poorly written, very badly executed. The characters were just not fully formed at all. The rationale for things that happened, things that were said, how things were said was just really, really poor. And I ended up kind of flicking through this one and reading the last chapter just to kind of see how it concluded, and it really didn't get any better. Essentially what this one was about was this young girl called Chloe. She is a drug mule for a kind of another criminal, and she finds herself in Mexico. She gets herself in the wrong situation at the wrong time, and she gets picked up by the Zeta cartel and taken back to their compound, and they're very much planning to use and abuse her and eventually murder her. Now she knows that she's in a very tricky spot, so she attempts to kill herself to get her out of the situation, but that fails. And then she runs into the arms of Kyle, who happens to be the enforcer for this cartel, and with absolutely no rationale, reasoning, any indication that he might be her saviour, she pretty much begs him to take her for himself to protect her from these other people in the cartel. And like I say, I would have no problem with this if he'd given her any indication that he was gentler, nicer, that he was attracted to her in any way. He'd given her no indication at all that he was a decent man. In fact, he wasn't at all. And so I didn't really get why she seemed connected to him or why they should be together. The language was really bad in this one, and yeah, it kind of just went bad from there. So like I say, I DNF'd it. Had I continued to read it, it would have been a 2-star. So I thought, don't trust myself to find a Yakuza mafia romance. So I asked on my Instagram if anyone had any recommendations for me, either cartel or Yakuza romances, and I got 2 recommendations. The first one was Haruaki by Cala Reilly, and this one is book 3 in the Syndicate series. Again, I don't normally read books out of order, but this is like a mafia series with different mafias, and the third book was specifically about the head of the Yakuza mafia in Chicago. His name was Kai, and heroine in this one was Cleo. So I want to give a shout out to Daniela Tavares, who recommended this one. I really enjoyed it, gave this one 4 stars. This one is kind of an arranged marriage situation, but essentially Cleo has just turned 18. Her father is looking for a suitable husband for her. He takes her out on her 18th birthday and parades her around the local mafia leaders, and they all have to decide if they're interested in making an offer. And Kai is one of those people who decides that he wants to place an offer for her hand in marriage. Now there's 3 groups that want to offer up a marriage for an alliance with these 2 mafia families. One of them is Kai from the Yakuza, then there's the Russian mafia group, and also an Italian mafia group. Now she absolutely doesn't want to be married off to the Russians because they're going to take her back to Russia and she's not going to be allowed to live in Chicago anymore, and Kai happens to be her first choice. But her father is heavily leaning towards the Russians because he thinks that will be better for the family overall. In the end, her uncle, who's actually head of the Irish mafia and more senior in the ranks than her dad, sort of steps in and says that he's happy to have it arranged marriage, but he wants to at least give Cleo some choice. And what he does is he arranges for her to have dates with each of the men that have kind of stepped up to the plate, as it were, so that she can see which one she likes, and that will help them make the decision. Of course, she really likes Kai, who's head of the Yakuza. They form a very quick and easy connection with each other, and he ends up giving her a mobile phone so he can contact her in a secret. And outside of these like more formal dates that are arranged, they start to develop a relationship, speak a lot overnight on the phone. And I really, really love this one because Kai, although he is head of his mafia organisation, he can be cruel when he needs to be, can be violent when he needs to be. He's completely soft for Cleo. He absolutely loves her, becomes obsessed with her, is like determined that he's going to make her his, and absolutely steps up to the plate when her life is in danger and he needs to take action and rescue her. So I really like this one. This was a really sweet and quite short romance. It wasn't particularly a long book, this one, but really sweet, really enjoyable to read, and had me smiling throughout. Then after that I went on to another Yakuza book, and this one was actually set in Tokyo, so it had an interesting twist to it, and it was called No Ordinary Love by Kenya Wright. Now this is a standalone, it doesn't appear to be part of a series, and this one was recommended by Metzi Reads Romance, so thank you very much for your recommendation. I did enjoy this one, however I rated it 3 stars, which means I liked it. So in this one we're following Kenji and Naomi, and Kenji is kind of in charge of the Yakuza Mafia in Tokyo, and he runs quite a lot of sort of underground sex clubs. And we have Naomi, who is a writer, and she's in Tokyo to research the underground sex clubs in Tokyo and write a book about it. Now when Kenji hears that she's in his city, snooping around his clubs, he basically steps in and basically says to Naomi, you can only be in the clubs if I'm there with you. Of course, Kenji takes an immediate shine to Naomi and wants to be with her, so he kind of does his devil's deal with her, if you like, where he sort of says, you've got to stay with me for the month and then I'll show you around my city and I'll show you all the clubs you want. So this had a very interesting premise. I thought there was a lot of potential for this one, because obviously they're operating in a sex club, so there was a lot of potential for, you know, some very kinky and sexy scenes, and really enjoy the fact that it was in Tokyo, so we had it in a very different setting. In the end though, I only rated this one 3 stars because I found that the writing was very chaotic. There was a lot of opportunity for some really good storylines, like I say, some very sexy scenes, but they weren't fully utilised, and the ending was a little bit of a disappointment for me, and so ultimately I chose to give this one a 3 stars, which still means I liked it. I just didn't really love it, but I would recommend, if you are after a Yakuza romance, particularly one set outside of the US, because I did think it was very interesting, and I did enjoy it. And then the last one that I read this month, I absolutely ended on a high. Gave this one 5 stars, and that was Mile High by Liz Tomforde, and it's book 1 in the Windy City series. Obviously this one's been doing the rounds, everyone's been talking about how great it is. I've been putting it off because it's actually quite a long book. It's nearly 500 pages, and also I have to be in the mood for kind of a sports romance, which this one is, and it's a sports romance, and our hero Xanders is an ice hockey player. And then we have Stevie, who is the twin sister of Ryan Shea, who's very famous from book 2, and is a flight attendant. So essentially what happens here is that Xander's hockey team, who I believe are the Raptors, the Chicago Raptors, as they're flying around the country playing their games, they have a private charter plane, and Stevie is one of the flight attendants on this plane. Now Xanders has a reputation very much for being a ladies' man. He has a woman in every city. He is all about one-night stands. He doesn't want to settle down. And when he meets Stevie for the first time, he absolutely is totally drawn to her, thinks she's absolutely beautiful, finds her very attractive, and kind of wants her to be his next conquest. But Stevie doesn't want to jeopardise her job because there's a no fraternisation rule, and also she is not wowed by the fact that he's a famous sportsman, because her brother is equally as famous, if not more, as a basketball player. So she's not particularly wowed by who he is, his position, but he's undeniably handsome, and she does have a very hard time denying their chemistry, shall we say. And so over the course of weeks, Xanders finally grinds her down until she agrees to a one-night stand with him. But of course, the one-night stand isn't enough for either of them. They need to keep seeing each other. But Xanders very much needs to maintain his reputation, because you know, he's known as this wild, crazy man on the ice. He's always getting into fights. and he's very much a ladies' man off the ice, and he needs to keep this persona going in the media, and so at first they keep their relationship secret, and it's kind of how they start to get to know each other, how Steve starts to get to know the real him that's different from this media persona he puts out, how they come together, and then kind of what happens when people start to find out that they're together, and how things maybe start to unravel from there. But I thought this was really well written. It was really well paced. It didn't feel like 490 pages at all. I absolutely love this couple, warmed to them straight away, really liked both of them, could see both points of view, and I thought they were wonderfully written characters, and I really liked how they were able to resolve some of the issues that they had, and fix other relationships in their life, and it absolutely set up the next book, which I will be very eager to read in the coming weeks. So I would highly recommend the book, thoroughly enjoyed it, and like I say, I gave it 5 stars. It was my only 5-star of the month. So there we have it, that's the 16 books that I've finished so far this month. I was really hoping to finish and be able to review Fall Into You by J T Geissinger, which is actually the book that I'm currently reading. However, I needed to get this filmed so that I could get it edited and up for Monday. And so this is that book is gonna have to slip into next month's, but I'm halfway through. I'm absolutely loving it. I love a J T Geissinger book, so I have full and high hopes that this one will also be a 5-star. But if you want to know how I get on with that, then keep an eye out on my social media, because I'm sure I'll share my review on there. But obviously next month I'll wrap it up as well at the end of the month. So anyway, that's all I've got for you today. This will be another long video, but I hope you enjoy it, and I want to say thank you very much for watching if you made it this far. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and I'm always keen to know what you've been reading this month, if we've got any books in common, and if you've got any books you want to recommend for me to read in the future. Make sure you pop all of that in the comments down below. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. I just didn't like it as much as the set in Tokyo, blah blah blah. Now Cleo in this one, Cleo's dad was trying now I specifically picked this one up because I read a lot of Mafia Irish, and basically a sat-nav takes her down a back road off the main obviously taking her off the back road. So of course he turns up at her cabin behaviours and traits that very much put him in the psychopath he has some so it's Tana, right? So should we start again? A front door that ascension essentially, and Tara I'm here, you can see my hands.